Hello and welcome to an introduction to Enterprise Architecture Frameworks, which defines how to organize the structure and views associated with an enterprise. We are going to start by introducing some of the most known frameworks, and its concepts. EABOK, Enterprise Architecture Body of Knowledge. The Enterprise Architecture Body of Knowledge EABOK is a guide to enterprise architecture produced by MITRE, specifically MITRE's Center for Innovative Computing and Informatics, and is substantially funded by U.S. government agencies. It provides a critical review of enterprise architecture issues in the context of the needs of an organization. Because it provides a big-picture view of needs and methods, some enterprise architecture practitioners recommend it as the first port of call for a business establishing an enterprise architecture unit. Zachman Framework. The Zachman Framework is an enterprise architecture framework for enterprise architecture, which provides a formal and highly structured way of viewing and defining an enterprise. First introduced by John Zachman in 1980, whom had been involved at IBM in the development of Business System Planning (BSP). The method for analyzing, defining and designing an information architecture of organizations. TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework. TOGAF is a framework for enterprise architecture which provides a comprehensive approach for designing, planning, implementing, and governing an enterprise information architecture. TOGAF is a registered trademark of the Open Group in the United States and other countries. TOGAF is developed by the Open Group Architecture Forum and has been continuously evolving since the mid-1990s. During the next minutes, we are going to introduce you to the concepts and phases behind the Open Group Architecture Framework. Phase 0, Preliminary Phase. This preliminary phase is about defining where, what, why, who, and how we do architecture in the enterprise concerned. The main aspects are as follows. Defining the enterprise. Identifying key drivers and elements in the organizational context. Defining the requirements for architecture work. Defining the architecture principles that will inform any architecture work. Defining the framework to be used. Defining the relationships between management frameworks. And evaluating the enterprise architecture maturity. Phase A, Architecture Vision. Phase A starts with receipt of a request for architecture work from the sponsoring organization to the architecture organization. Phase A also defines what is in and what is outside the scope of the architecture effort and the constraints that must be dealt with. Scoping decisions need to be made on the basis of a practical assessment of resource and competence availability, and the value that can realistically be expected to accrue to the enterprise from the chosen scope of architecture work. Phase B, Business Architecture. In summary, the business architecture describes the product and/or service strategy, and the organizational, functional, process, information, and geographic aspects of the business environment. The objectives of Phase B are to develop the target business architecture that describes how the enterprise needs to operate to achieve the business goals, and respond to the strategic drivers set out in the architecture vision, in a way that addresses the request for architecture work and stakeholder concerns. Identify candidate architecture roadmap components based upon gaps between the baseline and target business architectures. Phase C, Information Systems Architectures. Phase C involves some combination of data and application architecture, in either order. Advocates exist for both sequences. For example, Steven Spivak's Enterprise Architecture Planning BP recommends a data-driven approach. On the other hand, major applications systems, such as those for Enterprise Resource Planning (ERP), Customer Relationship Management (CRM), etc., often provide a combination of technology infrastructure and business application logic, and some organizations take an application-driven approach, whereby they recognize certain key applications as forming the core underpinning of the mission-critical business processes, and take the implementation and integration of those core applications as the primary focus of architecture effort, the integration issues often constituting a major challenge. Phase D, Technology Architecture. As part of Phase D, the architecture team will need to consider what relevant technology architecture resources are available in the architecture repository. In particular, existing IT services as documented in the IT repository or IT service catalog. TOGAF Technical Reference Model (TRM) Generic technology model relevant to the organization's industry vertical sector. Technology model relevant to common systems architectures. Phase E, opportunities and solutions. Phase E concentrates on how to deliver the architecture. It takes into account the complete set of gaps between the target and baseline architectures in all architecture domains, and logically groups changes into work packages within the enterprise's portfolios. This is an effort to build a best-fit roadmap that is based upon the stakeholder requirements, the enterprise's business transformation readiness, identified opportunities and solutions, and identified implementation constraints. The key is to focus on the final target while realizing incremental business value. Phase E is the initial step on the creation of the implementation and migration plan, which is completed in Phase F. It provides the basis of a well-considered implementation and migration plan that is integrated into the enterprise's portfolio in Phase F. Phase F, Migration Planning. The focus of Phase F is the creation of an implementation and migration plan in cooperation with the portfolio and project managers. Phase E provides an incomplete architecture roadmap and implementation and migration plan that address the request for architecture work. In Phase F, this roadmap and the implementation and migration plan are integrated with the enterprise's other change activity. Phase G, Implementation Governance. It is here that all the information for successful management of the various implementation projects is brought together. Note that, in parallel with Phase G, there is the execution of an organizational-specific development process, where the actual development happens. To enable early realization of business value and benefits, and to minimize the risk in the transformation and migration program, the favored approach is to deploy the target architecture as a series of transitions. Each transition represents an incremental step towards the target, and each delivers business benefit in its own right. Phase H, Architecture Change Management. The goal of an architecture change management process is to ensure that the architecture achieves its original target business value. This includes managing changes to the architecture in a cohesive and architected way. This process will typically provide for the continual monitoring of such things as governance requests, new developments in technology, and changes in the business environment. When changes are identified, change management will determine whether to formally initiate a new architecture evolution cycle. Additionally, the architecture change management process aims to establish and support the implemented enterprise architecture as a dynamic architecture, that is, one having the flexibility to evolve rapidly in response to changes in the technology and business environment.